This week, I'm excited to introduce you to Nathan Perdriau. Nathan is a co-founder of BlueSense Digital, a performance digital marketing agency specializing in scaling e-commerce brands through ultimately paid strategies. I actually reached out to Nathan as I love the content he writes on LinkedIn. And truthfully, I love how transparent the BlueSense Digital team are around their results and their processes. So really looking forward to chatting and hearing Nathan's insights into the year so far in e-commerce. So, mate, a big welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries. Looking forward to learning more about yourself and how you found the year and some issues with the clients. But a little bit of background, mate. How did you get started and what's your sort of background? I guess you're a Melbourne boy initially?
Grew up in Melbourne. Yep, that's correct. And then probably about 3.5 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago, I got into e-commerce. So Started off with the basic dropshipping model where you're not actually holding stock, just moving stock straight from China to the consumer, and was doing that through Google and Facebook ads primarily. Moved into actually holding stock for a few brands, was doing quite well, but then just found myself not enjoying a lot of the aspects of e-com, which we can go into further detail on later. So we pivoted into the agency space. I partnered with my business partner, Sebastian, who leads up more the sales and business development side of things. And then I'm on the actual core service delivery.
Yeah, fantastic. And how have you, so you guys have been going about 18 months. How have you found the agency journey so far? It can be a great one. It can be a tough one and you know, all in a day, basically.
Yeah. It's evolved a lot. My role has obviously, as you could probably imagine, it's changed every 3 to 6 months. But it's been a super exciting journey. At the moment, I'm predominantly on systems building and head of paid media, so just managing the paid media team and upskilling everyone, which has been really rewarding. Obviously, taking on new people in the team, continuing to grow, and then continuing to upskill them into seniors and beyond.
Mate, before we get into the e-com side of things, I'd like to kind of learn a little bit more about the individual. So, what do you do on weekends? How do you sort of get away from e-com? How do you relax? What sort of things are you into?
I'm not going to have a good answer here. I'm not going to have the answer you're looking for. But man, I just work a lot. I'm probably one of the most boring people you've met in terms of since we started the agency for the last 2 years, it's just been working all day, every day, really. I'm into my fitness. I'm obviously at the gym a fair bit. Was into jiu-jitsu for a while. But I don't know if you know anyone that does jiu-jitsu, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. You start training and then you have to train like 5 days a week to improve as quickly as you want to improve. But that's definitely something I'll be keen to get back into over the course of the next few months. Have
you kept up the fitness though whilst you're working? Like obviously working all the time is quite stressful. How have you balanced that or you haven't balanced that basically?
I've got a good solution that I've found. It's an expensive solution, but as we started ramping up work, it becomes super hard to actually leave work and go and exercise. So I started with a PT probably 3 to 4 months ago, and that's just forced me. I know that Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, I have to rock up, or else he's just going to be standing there going, "Where is he?" So that's now been really, really good for me. I've been consistent for 3 days a week for the last 3 or so months.
Yeah, nice one. All right, we'll get into some e-com talk. So, mate, what's been the biggest challenge you've had with client campaigns in 2023 as a broad overview?
That's an interesting one. The main challenge that we've probably had is we've started orientating towards MER and CAC rather than in-platform ROAS. And we've gone through this big education cycle with all of our clients as well as new clients coming on board on trying to reposition everyone to be looking at MER and CAC rather than in-platform ROAS, in-platform CPAs, etc. The main reason for that has been, number one, privacy settings. Obviously, as privacy continues to ramp, Google Chrome's claiming that they're banning cookies in 2024, but they've been saying that for the last 3 years. It's going to be harder and harder to track in platform, and so it's really important to more so be looking at total marketing spend as a proportion of total revenue, and tracking that way rather than looking at the actual in-platform metrics. The second side of things is increasingly complex customer journeys. As you're probably aware, a user doesn't see a Facebook ad and then just buy. They normally see a Facebook ad, then they'll pathway to Google, then they'll pathway back to Facebook. Then if you've got TikTok retargeting ads, they might come to a TikTok ad. And then at the end of the day, all of these platforms are going to then claim the purchase. And so it becomes very difficult to make any kind of educated decision if you're looking at all of the in-platform numbers and trusting them with 100% certainty.
Yep. Yeah, that's something I'm sort of seeing a lot as well, and it always is hard to kind of get the right attribution. So is it what would your recommendation be on the closest source of truth for some of that? Like, what's the default? Do you go back to the platform like Shopify for example, or do you trust Google Analytics?
Yeah, so we'll go to Shopify in terms of if we're looking at top line revenue numbers, especially because it'll give us a breakdown of returns and things like that. If you look at Google Analytics, it's always just going to give total revenue rather than gross. And it is important to have that extra level of detail if we are like considering the financials of the business. But in terms of looking at in-platform ROAS versus MER, I'm not saying, and some people take this wrong, like, oh, we'll just throw in-platform ROAS in the bin. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there's a nice middle ground of understanding, okay, Google's reporting a 10 ROAS, but it's probably claiming all of the bottom of funnel conversions that are coming from Facebook.
Yeah.
So let's look at total MER and see what the impact is when we start redistributing budgets.
Yeah. And just for those listening that might not be aware, MER, marketing efficiency ratio.
Yeah, which is total revenue divided by total spend.
Yep.
So you can conceptualize it as it's pretty much the same as return on ad spend. When you spend $1, you get X dollars back. But instead of looking at just the in-platform spend and the in-platform attributed ROAS, you're looking at the total store-wide revenue and the total marketing spend across all platforms. An example of why that might be important is if you were to launch a YouTube campaign, for example, maybe a YouTube retargeting campaign, YouTube's like notoriously bad for not being able to track conversions properly because most people that watch a YouTube ad don't click on it and then buy. They'll often search for the brand and then buy. And so your brand search or another campaign will get attributed and the YouTube campaign won't. So if you were to go and launch a YouTube retargeting campaign, you'll see ROAS in platform won't increase. In fact, it'll maybe decrease, but your total store revenue will actually go up because you'll be pushing more users through the funnel and you'll see better efficiency. So that's like one of the examples of where if you look at in-platform ROAS, you might make a decision and go, oh, that didn't work. But if you look at the total store-wide revenue, you'll actually see a big uptick.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great insights, mate. And I guess when you're looking to, or when funds are getting tight, and you start to get questions on some of those campaigns, it's an easy throwaway line to say, look, YouTube, isn't working, or it's awareness phase, and we're not kind of getting our bang for buck. But if you then use that different metric, then it can kind of give you a better actual picture of what's happening. And CAC, sure. Mate, so cost, customer acquisition costs, just for those who might not be familiar with those terms. That's just the metric that you're suggesting works best to I guess, summarize what it costs to acquire a new customer.
Yeah, absolutely, especially for retention-based businesses. So if you're selling a product where you're not necessarily trying to be profitable on first purchase, so normally consumable products where the end consumer is going to come back and repeat buy, looking at new customer acquisition is really important store-wide. In Shopify, you can look at it really easily if you just do a filter by customers added in the last 30 days. And then you usually need to do an additional filter by order value above $0, or else it's just going to count email leads. Or you can use a third-party app, and then you just take that number and you divide it by total spend. So total spend divided by whatever your new customers have been in the last 30 days. And we've found that to be incredibly insightful whenever we're scaling a retention-based business, because we can track new customer acquisition month on month with the according spend and see, okay, we increased spend by $2,000 on Facebook this month, but new customer acquisition actually didn't change. Yep. But the ROAS stayed the same. The attributed revenue went up. What happened there? And it was that Facebook went ahead and just claimed all of your returning customers as purchases for itself through view-through conversions or users clicking on those ads. So that is an incredible metric to sort of North Star yourself towards if you do have a high repeat purchase rate.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. And it actually kind of ties in nicely to a bit of content I was looking at before on your website around kind of the full funnel approach. And I think one of your quotes was around, your funnels are only as strong as the weakest link. So that sort of almost ties in nicely to that piece of content on the website as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mate, how are you? We're sort of getting close now to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas, Singles Day, Boxing Day. How are you seeing this year looking? Is there some sort of common themes or some common focuses that you guys are looking to provide for your clients for this upcoming kind of probably the most important quarter in e-com?
Yeah, for sure. There's a stat out there somewhere, I can't find it, but I saw it, which was 32% of total e-com revenue was done between November to December.
Wow, okay.
It's absurd. Yep. We actually put together a slideshow. Let me try to find it somewhere here. We put a slideshow together for our clients this year and a video planning out what we would recommend. And the strategy essentially is gather as much first-party data as you can prior to when CPMs inflate. So run giveaways, run some kind of email lead generation so you can build up all that first-party data of users that are engaged with your brand, and then retarget them through SMS, email, and then even Facebook custom audiences if you have a big enough custom audience, because CPMs will go up like 2x, 3x during November to December. So targeting cold with direct-to-consumer ads, direct response ads, is going to be hard.
Interesting.
Moving into that actual period, our focus this year primarily has actually not been on what's the creative strategy, what's how much budget should be allocating, what's the structure, but instead, how do we actually make money in November, December? Because most brands go into Black Friday and then just store-wide 30% discount everything, do a revenue all-time high, and then end up with negative $1,000 P&L when their accountant finishes their yearly tax return. And they go, oh, that didn't work. So we've really focused around educating clients on understanding their unit economics, understanding their financials, and discounting appropriately. So only heavily discounting products that haven't moved in the last 3 months, all those overstocked products that are just taking up inventory fees. Yep. Then discounting the upsells and the cross-sell products where there's a bit of room. And then just not discounting your core products or not discounting them heavily so that you can maintain margins on whatever you're selling. You can do that really well and clever with bundles and things like that. But that's been the focus, is let's not go for revenue all-time highs, let's go for profit all-time highs.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And if you do have those slides or that video, I'll include them in the show notes as well. So people can actually go in and have a look and see what you're talking about there. But yeah, that makes sense. And so are you advising clients to sort of, the thing I've noticed over the last couple of years has been a lot of creep, right? So brands are just so keen to get that dollar, first use of that dollar. So they're going a little bit earlier. Is that something you'd advise? How do you sort of get around that, or do you remain true and hold firm and only sort of do the discounts on those days?
I would launch early. I would. The issue is everyone does it now. It's funny, last year we advised everyone launches a little bit early, and then everyone just watched their competitors launch 2 weeks early, and then everyone's scrambling to quickly, should we launch, should we not? The competitors are taking all of the revenue that we might be getting forward in time. I would prepare to launch early, and then I actually would just hold off until your key competitors launch, to be honest. The longer you extend out the Black Friday period, the less profitable you'll actually end up being, because you start pushing new customer acquisition quite hard through paid media, and that just gets less and less efficient, especially as you enter into Black Friday and continue extending that out. So the earlier you can get in, the better in terms of CPMs, but also you're hurting yourself, because then you're going to have a really long sales cycle, which is going to hurt profitability. So it's sort of finding that middle ground and just keeping an eye on the competitors and the landscape.
Yeah, awesome, mate. I love it. Some great insights and great tips there. Just with on sort of Meta and the advertising around the creative that you just sort of spoke about before, how important, you're obviously overseeing a lot of e-com campaigns around Meta. How important is the creative, and what sort of creative are you finding working best? I know this year I found a lot of, clients are kind of experimenting on TikTok and finding what works well on TikTok, flicking it across and running ad campaigns across that. Are you still seeing that raw, unpolished UGC having good cut through this year? Or I'd be interested to get your thoughts on what's working for your clients.
Yeah. First up, creatives become more and more important every month. It's sort of flipped the script where the approach on Facebook used to be that let's go create the creative and then find the audience. But sorry, the other way around. It's let's find the audience and then create the creative for them. So like let's target interests of people that like dogs and then let's make creative for these users. Yep. But now it's let's create creative that's for the audience and then we let Facebook go and find the audience based on who's interacting with the creative. So it's an interesting dynamic change as everything's going a little bit more broad. In terms of UGC, it's pretty dependent on the client and the account. It's still working like really well. I think there was this huge UGC boom where you've never seen a UGC ad before, and now suddenly every single ad you see on your feeds is just user generated content over and over again. So I think I don't think it's where it was 6 months ago, but I think it still definitely has a place, particularly in bottom of funnel. If you're warming users up to the brand with more professional, clean cut branding assets, and then you move into actual consumers directly objection handling why you might not have purchased and going, hey, actually the product does do what they say it does, or hey, they actually have 5,000 reviews and that's in an organic piece of content. That seems to perform really well at those retargeting level campaigns.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great little bit of nuance there, I think, too, is, because I've worked with a few brands and seen quite a few brands that have that quite polished. They're very protective over the tone of voice, and that's fair enough. They're a luxury brands. But then it's a really good point around, more colder audiences, you can keep that. But then as it gets down the funnel, then you can implement some UGC, which is, really good insight. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
But, you're obviously, the agency's been going about 18 months, and no doubt over that 18 months, you've onboarded a lot of new clients and continuing to do so. Are there some common themes, or I would say common mistakes, but are there some consistent things that you notice when you're taking over from other agencies or from the e-commerce brands themselves that that perhaps we can advise our listeners to look out for and to avoid?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot that I could run through. I'll give you a common flaw, and then maybe a Facebook, and then maybe like financials around MER and CAC and
Perfect.
stuff. So on the Google side of things, the most common issue that I'm seeing across most accounts is over segmentation. The reason why that's so important is because with everything moving towards machine learning based bidding, what ends up happening is the more data that you can have consolidated within campaigns, within ad groups, within ads, the better the performance will end up being, because you have better back-end modeling on the custom, the target demographic, because there's more data. The smaller the data is, the more likely there'll be bias in that data set. So if you have, for example, 100 campaigns and each has 10 conversions, that's going to perform a lot worse than if you were to just have one campaign but it has 1,000 conversions. Yep. Because that data doesn't get shared at the campaign level. So on Google, it's often, if you're going to hyper segment down, if you're going to have 4, 5, 6 different campaigns, it's important for there to be a reason as to why that's the case. Is there a unit economic reason? Do you want to be prioritizing that campaign, and so you need the ability to segment it and increase budget on those SKUs? Otherwise, I would always recommend consolidating wherever you can.
Interesting.
On the Facebook on the Facebook side of things.
Sorry, mate. You go. Oh, you're on a roll.
On the Facebook side of things, it's probably not having a clear testing framework or structure. So I'll always come into accounts and audit them, and it's just a few campaigns running with no real strategy or direction as to what's going on. What are we actually testing at the moment? What have we tested? What were the results of those tests? And how's that informing us moving forward? The only way to continue to see growth or improvement within an account is to be testing things, taking key takeaways away, and then informing the next test. So are we testing creative assets? Okay, which one performed well? That one performed well. Why did it perform well? Why did the others not? And then how does that inform the next test? And then building out scaling campaigns adjacent as we start to obviously build data on what's working and what's not. You'd be surprised, but 90% of accounts have no direction at all as to what they're testing or why they should even be testing in the first place.
Yeah. So how much, is there some intricacies within that testing that you recommend? So, should the test go for certain amount of time, certain amount of budget? Like, how do you sort of allocate the budgets when it comes to testing? Should you always have some sort of testing in place? By the sounds of it, I would say yes. What does that next level of kind of nuance look like?
Yeah, that's the golden question. It's I'm going to give a bad answer, but I'll try to elaborate on it, which is it's super dependent on the account. And the client. If you're selling a $2,000 product, the testing budget has to go up from a $100 product. But so it's really hard to give metrics. I've tried to write LinkedIn posts about this and give like, hey, these are just rules you should follow. We do have some rules internally. Like I would never kill a test if we haven't spent at least 1.5x the AOV on that test. So if we're selling a $200 product, we really want to spend at least $300 on a test. But that's based on the fact that we're optimizing for conversions for that test. That's the KPI. What if we're just optimizing for click-through rates on creative assets? Then we can probably cut it a little bit shorter. But what if we spend $10,000 on those creative assets? Well, then we should probably spend a little bit more. We shouldn't just throw $10,000 creative assets in the bin after only spending $500 in paid media on them. So there is a lot of nuance that's going to change the numbers. And I think that's why media buying agencies like ourselves even exist in the first place. If there was just a clear manual, Facebook would just make it and give it to you, and then they would just cut out the middleman, and then everyone could just spend more on ads and not spend on agencies. But yeah, I don't think it's the perfect answer that you're after.
No,
but
that
it's a hard question.
Even to be honest, mate, just seeing you kind of work through that, I think gives our audience a bit of an idea as to some of the things that they should be thinking about. So sometimes it's not the answer I'm looking for, it's just the workings out. And the third one, what was the third one you touched on?
The third one would be not understanding the unit economics.
Yep.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, but especially with smaller clients, this isn't really an issue with anyone doing above, it actually still is, an issue with people doing above 10 million revenue annualized a year. But very, very little business owners understand their unit economics whatsoever. If you were to ask 10 business owners tomorrow in ecom, what's your contribution margins? Maybe one or two would be able to give you an answer that's accurate.
Yep.
So if you don't know your contribution margins, for example, how do you know what you can afford to spend to acquire a customer and still be profitable? How do you know what your MER target should be? How do you know what your new customer acquisition target should be? It becomes very difficult to scale a brand if you don't know the basics of the financials and the economics. So that's something that we've started working really, really hard on with the onboarding process of bringing new clients on. Is if they don't understand those unit economics, hey, we're not going to launch anything until you do. And we're going to work with you to actually get a more fundamental understanding of all of those numbers. What are your 3PL costs? What are the transaction costs? Are you using like Shopify's transactions, or are you using a third party where then Shopify adds on a 2% fee? Because these things do make a difference when we're looking to 10x an account.
Yeah, interesting. And so future predictions, mate, what do you think, if we do this podcast this time next year, what are some of the strategies you think we'll be talking about in terms of, how you see the industry trending more broadly as an e-com agency?
Good question. I think I'll say some other stuff, but I think mirror and CAC is a big one. I think privacy settings will continue ramping up, so it's more important to look at higher level metrics rather than the in-platform metrics. But on top of that, I think a bit of a wild prediction is probably YouTube Shorts is going to be a decent one. I think that'll start working well. YouTube's a hard platform to crack. I wouldn't recommend e-com owners go and start spending on YouTube. And the reason there's a lot of reasons why that's the case, but the primary reason is I heard a good analogy a while ago, which is launching a YouTube campaign is like driving a large ship, whereas launching a Facebook campaign is like being in a speedboat. You have a lot of control, you can quickly move, change, pivot, and you can get it profitable quickly. Whereas on YouTube, you just have to spend a lot of money to get that ship up and running. But once it's running, it'll be profitable for a very long time, and there's not really that much creative fatigue on YouTube.
Yep.
I think with YouTube Shorts, it changes it up a little bit. I think because now we have that like Instagram Reel, TikTok dynamic on the platform, there might actually be an opportunity there. And there's 2 billion users on YouTube. So it's not like a platform where it's a new platform. Is anyone using it? There's a lot of data. It's also owned by Google. So Google has all of the customer data from search, and they just translate that over into the YouTube targeting.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be your suggestion in terms of that YouTube Shorts? Is that they run organic content around their products, or they're advertising on YouTube Shorts? Because I think they've just rolled that out, haven't they, recently? You can advertise on YouTube Shorts now.
Yeah, you can. We've done quite a bit of testing on advertising on YouTube Shorts, and we've seen okay results. Once again, the issue with YouTube is people pathway to brand search, but not as much with Shorts, because 90% of Shorts that are watched on mobile, and people will click through on mobile. In terms of like what are the action items, what can you actually take from it? I would just continue staying educated. At least that's what I'm doing. I'm continuing to stay educated on YouTube Shorts. I'm connected with a bunch of people on LinkedIn who the only content they post is YouTube related content for ecom brands, and I'm continuing to watch videos and keep updated on the space, as well as continuing to test with small budgets on clients. Once again, if YouTube Shorts takes $50,000 to work, it doesn't apply to like 99% of ecom owners. So, okay, there's not much you can do with it. But the second it becomes affordable, the second it becomes like that speedboat, which Facebook is, where you can launch with $20, do some creative tests and start saying something that works and scalable. I think there'll be a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. We'll revisit this podcast in 12 months' time and see how that's going, mate.
Yeah, we'll see if I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's always hard to predict the future. Are you doing much on TikTok? Do you do much sort of advertising on TikTok? Obviously, they're starting to roll out, on platform shopping. I don't think it's in Australia yet, but they're rolling that out. Are you doing much by way of TikTok advertising?
Not a whole lot. No, we're doing a little bit for a few clients. The two issues that I've found with TikTok, and I think it's a good platform. I think big businesses should absolutely advertise on it, and people should test it out. But the two issues that I've found is that you sort of need custom content for the platform. If you just take a Facebook ad and try and run it on TikTok, it generally doesn't work. Sometimes it has for a few clients that we've tested, but generally it won't. You need something that's sort of on trend, that's going to capture that first 25% view rate, and then people are going to be in and hooked. And the consequence of that is that kind of content goes in and out of style every month. So you sort of have to, the creative fatigue's really, really high. You have to have new content being spat out all the time. And for smaller businesses that don't want to go and allocate a $5,000 a month budget just to creative production for TikTok ads, it's been difficult unless the business owner wants to create it themselves, or they have some dedicated creators and they're up to date. They understand the new hooks, they understand the new trends, and they're willing to scale those assets very, very quickly, knowing that they're going to fatigue in 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, that's very true. It is very much sort of like a fast fashion, almost. It's whatever worked that 1 month will probably not work the next month because the trend has moved so quickly.
And yeah, absolutely.
All right, mate. A couple more questions. So, what's the sort of type of business that you guys work with? Who's your typical kind of client, customer that is sort of best suited to come on board with you guys?
Typical business is e-commerce only. We don't service anyone out of e-com. And annualized revenue is between 2 to 20 million.
Yeah.
So that's what we've found is the perfect ideal client profile for us to provide the most amount of value. Generally speaking, it's more so on the lower end where we can provide more value in terms of high-level business recommendations, talking about the unit economics, talking about CRO, talking about all these retention strategies, other aspects that we don't directly manage, but where everyone's upskilled heavily in them. And we do a lot of cross-collaboration with other agencies to make sure we really understand retention strategies, really understand unit economics and financials of businesses. But also the high end, there's a lot of leverage in terms of we can normally come into a higher end client and make a 10% impact, which at 20 million is a large impact.
Yeah, for sure. And most of those, fair to say, would be on Shopify Plus, or like, it'd be interesting. Is there anyone who's not on Shopify Plus or that you work with? Like, what's the second biggest e-com platform outside of that?
Yeah, 90% are on Shopify.
Yep.
10%, it's a handful. It's all over the place. Anything out of Shopify, I don't really like working on. There's all kinds of issues with the other platforms. Like Shopify has its own issues, but probably BigCommerce. We have quite a few clients on BigCommerce.
Yep. Yeah, nice. You have much on WordPress and WooCommerce? Or is people?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, more so the number one would be WooCommerce, number two would be Neato.
Okay, yep. Yeah, I've worked with a couple of Neato clients. I don't particularly like the platform. I don't know.
I don't like it at all.
But it always seems a little bit clunky. It's maybe it's more for a wholesale, or actually both the clients I had, both wholesalers that are trying to go vertical and want to try and stay on Neato, but the quicker you can...
I believe that's the main value prop. They have a few unique value props as to why people use them, but there's so many issues with the platform. Like, I'd highly, if anyone's watching this and they're thinking about it, I would highly recommend against it. One of the issues we're having right now with a client on Neato is they launched a whole new product range, but it's not syncing through the Google Merchant Center and being placed on Google. So we contacted support and they only have one integration app. There's nothing else. So you're siloed into one app. And we said, why is this happening? And they said, it's an error at the moment. It's been going on for a few months. We don't know how to fix it.
Okay.
And we're like, so we can't advertise any of the new products on site? No, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Well, look, really appreciate you giving us some pretty awesome insights there. I like the fact that you've mentioned to all our listening audience that they really need to understand the unit economics as much as they can. Start referring to MER or MER and customer acquisition costs as a couple of great metrics. Is there one last metric that we could that you think is important? Is it lifetime value or average order value? Is there anything that you can leave us with?
I can give you average order value. I made a few LinkedIn posts about this the other day, which got some good traction. People found it interesting, which is when you're looking at average order value on the back end of Shopify, what you're seeing is the mean average order value. So the average across all orders. I would highly recommend against looking at that number. And the reason being is that, firstly, median AOV will give you a better representation of where the cohort sits, and that will give you a better indicator of where you should be setting offer thresholds, whether that's a free shipping threshold at $100 or whether that's a get a free sample or gift at this amount. Mean will always get heavily skewed depending on outliers. I see this on almost every single store where they might get 50 purchases that are valued at $5 and then the mean gets skewed down, and so they're not setting the thresholds right. The second reason why I'd look at median is because there's normally two peaks in the cohort data. So when you're looking at number of customers over average order value, you'll normally see a peak at, let's say, $50 and then another peak at $80. And the reason for that is that existing customers will buy at X amount, but returning customers will always spend more. They already trust the brand. They want to make a bigger order. And so you need to be setting your threshold offers accordingly. If you're looking at the mean, you'll go, oh, our AOV is $70. Let's set a threshold at 80. But they don't realize that's pushing no one at 50 up. No one's doubling their cart value. And then everyone at 80 is just return customers who are already going to return anyway. And then they're just getting the offer for free. And now you're just ruining your unit economics and just giving money away. So if you can understand that, you can curate 2 offers that is pushing both cohorts up. And you'll immediately see better profitability in AOV across the board.
That's outstanding. I love it. I honestly think people should go back and listen to this episode a couple of times, because there is a whole heap of information that you've given our audience. So that's fantastic, and I just love how the nuance within that. There's some really, really great takeaways. I'll go back and listen to this again. But I can see why you guys are highly regarded. Won a couple of awards, which I've seen, mate. So congrats on the work so early in your journey, and looking forward to consuming more of your content and watching your agency grow in Melbourne.
Appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Not a problem.